guys, welcome back to Schauer Thoughts, a podcast for left and right brainers, middle brainers, anyone with the corpus callosum brainstem, any sort of lobes. I am Sarah Schauer. I'm your host, and today we're going to be talking about how to be creative part 2. This is going to be fun. On this episode, we're going to cover divergent thinking, which is a necessary component to creativity. We are going to be approaching from the neuroscience, the grid, right? What has been outlined in the brain is important for creativity. And I will be applying it. If you are watching on YouTube, you can see a whole bunch of books in front of me because what is included in this episode is the importance of lateral learning and lateral thinking. There's divergent thinking, convergent thinking, lateral thinking, and we're going to put it all together and get interdisciplinary. But before we get into that, Sarah, how was your week? It was incredible. So I told y'all last week that I got invited to the Society for Neuroscience 2026, which was in San Diego, and I went down there, and it was so fun. I was invited by the Allen Institute. Thank you so much to the Allen Institute. They're such an incredible institute. Science is for everyone. It was something interesting, though, that did happen, and the Allen Institute invited me to an event that happened on Sunday night. And so I had my first book club meeting Sunday morning with everyone. We're discussing This Is What It Sounds Like. It's Prince's producer. She turned into a neuroscientist. She went back to school because she wanted to learn more about sound. I think it's so cool when someone starts in the arts and pivots to the sciences. That's actually very topical to what we're going to be talking about today. But I had the first book club meeting for that, and it was so much fun. Oh my God. You can still join book club, by the way. The link for it is in the bio. But yeah, and then after that, I immediately closed my laptop, and then I drove to San Diego. It was so cool. I got ready, and then I went to this event on technology, neuroscience technology and all this stuff on Sunday night. And I was speaking to it was all neuroscientists and different types of scientists in the room. I was incredible. I was so nervous. But the people at the Allen Institute, they invited me to talk to some other people after. And it was, I think I spoke to some people on like the board of directors, right? And they said, we were very moved by your video. And I was like, by my video? And I was like, oh my gosh. So on TikTok, I posted a video about me crying because I was invited to Neuroscience 2025 by the Allen Institute. And I was crying because, guys, you've heard this a million times. When I started this research and learning journey, I had just gotten sober, and also being neurodivergent and just numb for so long. And everyone's always talked to me like I was dumb. I didn't think I was smart ever. And so I know that I'm gaining confidence in my intellectual abilities now, but it was so validating to be invited by an actual bioscience institution to Neuroscience 2025 with actual neuroscientists. So the people at the Allen Institute, when I was talking to them, they saw my video, so I became acutely aware that all of these neuroscientists had seen me cry. But I mean, it was totally fine. They were like, oh, it's so endearing, and I was just so happy that they invited me. But I told the social media person for the Allen Institute, she was so incredibly nice. So nice. Oh my God. After the event, before the event, she invited me to the bar, and she's like, let's get you a mocktail. And I was like, what? Because it caught me off guard that she said mocktail, because normally people say cocktail. And she's like, well, since I watched the video, you're sober. And the fact that she remembered that, I mean, that was just so considerate. And she got me an entire Neuroscience 2025 pamphlet on the events. And I went through it, and she had marked certain things that she thought I would really enjoy. Like there was a speaker on autism and neuroscience and all this stuff. And it was just so cool. She was so considerate. And I told her, since the video did well on TikTok, and I've also worked in social media, I worked in advertising, I was like, feel free to use that video of me crying in any sort of social media materials or, proposals for increased community engagement, because the thing is, you do need proof in those sort of meetings. And I am not the only person who you know, should be invited to these events, right? There are so many people who are self-taught or like budding scientists or people, they said that they liked how I made neuroscience accessible. And I was like, well, go ahead and use my video because I want as many people, as possible, like different creators and different individuals and different communities to be invited to events like this because, it's important to know that you can. It's just anyone can because science is for everyone, and that's what their whole message was. And so I was like, go ahead. But it was so much fun. Oh my gosh. Some cool things that happened, mainly at Neuroscience 2025. I talked to so many people. Also, there's two people who follow me who invited me to their booth, and it was really cool because they have this machine that slices tissues into very, very thin slices, and they showed me like a demonstration on how it works, and I was like, oh my God, you two follow me, and you guys are doing stuff like this. This is so cool. And so, I got to meet a whole bunch of other people. At Neuroscience 2025, I keep repeating this, I wanted to speak to every single nonprofit that I could and every, open access sort of organization when it comes to research because I love free and affordable research options, also love community outreach, so I did. It was also so sweet because the nonprofits, I believe, had more limited budgets, so when you go through the convention, they had a bit, more modest, booths, and so every time I'd approach, they'd be like, hello, do you want to know about? And I was like, yes, I do. Do you have any pamphlets? And it was so funny. And then also I talked to, during the entire convention, they had hundreds of student researchers from all around the globe presenting their neuroscience research. And I talked to everyone I could find. I mean, I went through like all of everyone's research and talked to them about their stuff. It was kind of funny. I also mainly sought out people who were discussing the peripheral nervous system, which is so the central nervous system, which has the brain, is thought of as the more glamorous part of the nervous system because it has the brain. So not a lot of people study the peripheral nervous system, which I will say is a big issue, but we're going to get into that. So every person who studied the peripheral nervous system, they were like, oh my God, what's up? And I was like, hey, tell me about it. And the same thing, I also sought out the people who studied olfaction, which is smell. And so it was kind of funny. The peripheral nervous system people, there was like 5 to 10. I'm trying to think there, because the thing is they switched out some days, and then the olfactory had like 5 people. And so I was just excited to hear what they had to say. But it was so much fun. Oh my God. I learned so much and it was just so cool. There is an interesting issue though, I'm realizing, and this is not to discredit literally any young researcher's work and I'm, who am I, right? But the thing is I noticed that most people are studying the central nervous system, and there were so many projects that discussed hunger and sort of pain within the body. And since they were only studying the central nervous system, I was like, well, hunger pains are going to be discussed by the peripheral nervous system, right? And it was interesting. Also, the peripheral nervous system has... let me actually read this. Oh, by the way, guys, this is related. So last time I told you guys how to be more creative. I'm going to start collaging my notes. I did. You won't be able to see this, obviously, if you're listening. You're listening, but if you're watching on YouTube, you guys can see this. I started collaging my notes, and here it is. I just, you can freeze frame and just like pause. But when it comes to peripheral nervous system, at the bottom it says, is it true that we only have 5 senses? And no, that is not true. As every school child can tell you, we have 5 senses: vision, hearing, smell, touch, and taste. These, however, are just our exteroceptive senses, so called because they receive information from the external world. We have other senses that deal in other forms of information. Our sense of proprioception, for example, allows us to feel the position of our bodies. Our kinesthetic sense tells us when we are moving, and our vestibular sense tells us when we are tipping off balance. In addition, the sense of interoception, internal reception, keeps the brain up to date on conditions within the body, such as glucose levels, dehydration, and changes in heart rate. There is debate among researchers over whether interoception should be considered one sense or many senses. As things stand, there is no single agreed upon number of senses, but neuroscientists do agree that we have more than 5. So we do. So when I was going through some of the research, I was like, interesting. Everyone is mainly accounting for external senses. Internal senses seem to have been kind of not included. There was another thing, and there a lot of people, when they were discussing their research, they had like green labels or red labels, and red labels means like don't photograph, don't talk about because it hasn't been published yet. And so there was green means you can photograph it, and I had a press pass because that's so cool. I'm a content creator and that's considered press. But yeah, there was a couple studies that were interesting, and no disrespect. Some of them, one of them in particular, was studying coordination and balance in a certain population. And they had only included brain scans of people in an fMRI machine, right? Like they had to lay down in an MRI machine. And I understand that an MRI is much more detailed. But when you're talking about coordination and balance, the readings will absolutely be different if you are laying down versus standing up, right? So all of the, and I was like, I know an EEG is less detailed, but it could, if you did a sitting up EEG or standing EEG, I think it would have been more helpful for the issue that you are trying to understand. Because now the math is a bit different, because you're talking about, like, again, position of our bodies, when we're moving. I mean, they weren't moving, but the thing is if you're talking about body coordination, like, that is going to involve some, okay. But, vestibular sense tells us when we're tipping off balance. You can tell when you're laying down versus standing up. And then conditions of the body, like changes in heart rate. Your heart rate does change when you lay down sometimes. Yeah. Also, your blood pressure, does change when you lay down versus stand up. So I was noticing an issue across some research. And the thing is this does not mean, when I say this does not mean that these people are dumb or should know better. I'm saying that since I noticed it consistently, there is a system issue with how research is done and performed. And so that's something to think about. There was another olfactory research project that discussed Parkinson's and smell, and it was all through the lens of the central nervous system. And I wanted to be like, okay, I don't want to tell you how to do, I asked the individual, I was like, have you heard of olfactory enrichment for Alzheimer's? And Alzheimer's and Parkinson's are not the same thing. However, they are neurodegenerative diseases, and they are cousins, right? And the individual had never heard of olfactory enrichment. I pulled up some information, and she took a picture of my phone. I did give a lot of information out to other people because it seemed like they were only focusing on the central nervous system. But so Parkinson's is a neurodegenerative disease, but it also heavily involves muscles, and most of the muscles are going to be attached to like peripheral nervous nerves. So it just seemed like it seemed okay, but I get it. I understand. Maybe but the thing is, I don't want to, this is not to discredit anyone. I'm just saying that you need to, and I know you can't really zoom out, but need to zoom out, because I'm not sure if this is just research to establish understanding for a specific part, or if everyone's trying to solve something, the genuine intent. So I just say, like, if you're going to try to solve certain issues, maybe it's zoom out, but also I know that's not how research is done currently. So I just wanted to say that if you're a researcher and you're like, well, see, the issue is that you kind of have to, like, focus on like one area, and I understand that, but I'm saying, like, a lot of the hundreds of research projects that I went through, I was like, okay, so the part of the body that will probably discuss this is not being included in the study. So I don't know what to do with this information. But yeah, that was pretty cool. There was some other things. I can't get into it, but there was some things that were interesting. Okay. But yes, we're going to be talking about how to be more creative, and it is very topical. I assume actually most of this advice is going to go towards people who are more, kind of actually in the sciences or more hard sciences, more, less creative fields, just so you can actually like start establishing divergent thinking. Obviously, if you're not in a science or math or you're still in a creative profession, this can be applied to you because we're applying it to our everyday life, how to think more divergently. And I am neurodivergent, and also I'm gonna blow smoke up my own butt, I am incredibly creative. I'm sorry. It's just, I'm owning it. But I also brought a bunch of books. If you're watching on YouTube, you're like, holy crap. It's because at a certain point, we're going to talk about lateral thinking and lateral learning. And that's how I read and learn. I do lateral sort of things where I am interdisciplinary. And it's just a way to develop complex understanding of two topics at once, find the through line, and then you kind of simultaneously get the gist of two topics, and then you can use that, I keep bumping the mic, that through line to understand more complex things. It's kind of like a punchline. It's like a theme, right? Like what's the mission? What are we trying to communicate here? But yeah, we're going to discuss divergent thinking. This is so fun. I am going to have to give you guys a Miranda Priestley monologue when it comes to being creative, because the thing is this has to be said. Let me drink some water. If you're not understanding the Miranda Priestley reference, it's from The Devil Wears Prada, when Andy is, when they're editing at Vogue magazine, they're choosing, two different belt buckles, and they're like two different. They're like kind of the same-ish type of blue, but the buckles are different. And the artist, the designer, the editor, right? Like they're holding up the belt buckles, and they're like, "Which one do we choose? They're so different." And Andy, this journalist who doesn't have a background in fashion, she laughs. She's like. And then Miranda Priestley, is like, "Oh, you think this is funny? You think that this doesn't affect you?" And then Andy's wearing this, this jumper, this like sweater that's a certain type of cerulean blue. Well, it is cerulean. And Miranda Priestley goes on this whole thing about like, you probably, you try to communicate the point that you don't care about what you look like, right? You throw on that lumpy sweater and, to make like a statement that I'm like, it's whatever. But so what Miranda Priestley says is Yves Saint Laurent and a bunch of designers did different collections with cerulean blue years before, right? And then it's hot fashion brands. Then it trickled down into the department stores, into this, bargain bin that Andy plucked her sweater out of, right? And so it's like, you think that this doesn't affect you. However, that sweater was chosen by people in this room. Like, so everything affects everything. And so this is my Miranda Priestley spiel on why you need to be more creative. So, okay. With creativity, it's a highly feminized arena. It's personal expression. Express yourself, and they call you crazy or hysterical, but you're not, right? You're emotionally intelligent, discerning. The patriarchy has not and does not foster creativity. There's a strict adherence to roles, and that discourages divergent thinking, a necessary component to creativity. For thousands of years, women across the globe have been pioneers and leaders of song, dance, art, creative writing, creativity, and expression of all kinds. People fear creativity because they fear being mocked, and I ask, by who? The dominant culture, those who adhere to strict, patriarchal, and oppressive, which is the opposite of expressive, systems. You want to be creative? You're going to have to take yourself seriously. You're also going to have to take women, femininity, which is not the same as being a woman, and expression seriously. As a comedian, I'm acutely aware of who's laughing with me and who's laughing at me. I also know a hack when I see one and when I hear one. Copycats, those reciting scripts and lines from someone else, will always be blacklisted in the comedy sphere. That's not talent, that's a cheap shot, and they always miss the fucking point. When it comes to being creative, you need to know the actual difference between critic and fan, as their input is absolutely weighed differently. You also need to know that if you want to be respected, that primarily comes from other artists. Critics will give you fame, fans will give you love and hate, artists will give you respect. First, you respect yourself as an artist, as a creative. Second, you gain the respect of other artists, other creatives, right? You need to know who the fuck you are, who the fuck you're talking to, and whose opinion holds the least and most amount of weight. So how I'm bringing this in to the first part is that the use of I, right? Calling your power back, standing at attention, being the commander and pursuing your own commands, right? Your own expression, your own discipline. You can comply in advance when it is informed by your own ethics, right? Your own principles. And those you made yourself, not others. So, the people who say that creativity is not that deep are idiots. It's like if you paint a picture and use linear perspective to represent depth. People say it's not that deep because they're focused on the fucking dimensions, features of the physical canvas. Yes, it is flat. Good job. However, the point, the technique, the composition is representing depth and complexity. By saying it's not that deep when it comes to creativity, to art, you're admitting that you can't think abstractly. You're not a critic, you're at best an undercover fan, or at worst, someone on an unearned power trip declaring loudly, I'm a moron at an art show. Get out of here. This isn't embarrassing for the artist, it's humiliating for you. Creativity is that deep as it is the depth dimension, all right? So let's keep going. This is my Miranda Priestley monologue. Creativity is informed by lived experience, the dimension oppressive cultures devalue. But just because you devalue something doesn't mean it ceases to exist. Mathematically, this is a fool's errand, and when you show your life's work, the answer, the conclusion you've reached will be absolutely positively wrong, and you will feel wrong. But time's up, pencils down. Artists are within the dimension you ignore. You want depth, meaning, perspective, conviction, passion, courage. You need to express yourself. The dominant culture can give you fame, love, and hate, but creativity, art, expression, respect will give you worth, a life worth living. And then people say, but what if people don't like, my expression, my art? So fucking what? Liking and respecting are not the same thing. If you like sports and you watch a team play and you hate this team, you can absolutely hate the players. However, if there's a player you deeply hate, but they have genuine skill, are consistent, and have the stats, the lived experience, you will still absolutely respect them. A player, an artist, can be hated, disliked. But when you're creating, when you're on the field, being liked is not even close to the goal, right? If you're playing soccer, right, and you're in the middle of the game, right? Life, you're in the middle of the game. And you're focused on if the fans like you, you need to look up because the ball is coming right at you, right? Who cares if the fans like you in this current moment? You want your teammates to respect you. You want to be worth being on this team, right? You want to feel like you're contributing, you're doing something. You're moving, you're expressing, right? You're using your lived experience, your skills, which you built with discipline, right? To move and act accordingly, right? You are a team. If you're like, oh gosh, do I look cool to the fans? Are you actually competent, right? Can you play? Can you perform? Can you express in this context? It doesn't matter if they like you, right? No one is scouting players based on like, oh, they're charming. Sure, there's personality hires at work, but when it comes to expression, when it comes to your in play, right? Are you doing something worthwhile on the field, So it doesn't matter if it doesn't matter if they like your expression or not. The thing is that it goes into whole, like, the respectability politics. It's like respectability from the dominant culture, right? We want respect from the people expressing themselves, other artists, right? if I want genuine comedic feedback, I'm not going to most people. I'm going to other comedians, right? Well, actually, but the thing is when I'm learning, right, I get feedback from y'all because you are the relevant audience. When I get feedback, I make sure that you guys, you have a background in linguistics or education or, any like science. There's a lot of chemists that have been talking to me lately, right? That is feedback because you guys are the artists of this field. You are the players on this field, right? And I need to make sure that I'm having a worthwhile pursuit, okay? Let's keep going. All right. This is also just an additional point, which is going to be cool because I get to bring in a couple separate books for this. Also, just studying emotions and feelings for so long. Suppressing expression is how you accidentally develop the feeling of haunting. Suppressing the feelings, the emotions, and the actual motions, right? Your default mode network. It contains sense of self, self-image, and music preferences, every facet of music, rhythm, lyrics, melody, etc. Okay? This is all on your default mode network. You suppress it, your expression, right? Like how you move throughout the world. You suppress that, and it's like applying pressure to a record. You get pre-echo, you slow the music, you damage the piece itself. And the music produced, haunting. It follows you everywhere you go. The spirit of you trails behind, it watches. This is also now in the realm of vestibular motor hallucinations. I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily be a hallucination. I'm saying that there's an incongruency with internal feelings. There's a suppression of feeling. Most of the people who are afraid of what happens after they die, who keep pressing that question, are asking because the haunting has already started. Express yourself, lest the architecture of your personhood, spirit, self decay. Okay? And I do have This Is What It Sounds Like and Horror in Architecture. I also have a bunch of books on the brain and the default mode network, Your Brain on Art. So if you'd like to know more about the importance of expressing yourself, right? Oh, society's going to make fun of me. The dominant culture is going to make fun of you. And who gives a fuck about them? Well, if it's in terms of your safety, I understand if you're afraid to express yourself. Always, when you guys hear me talk about the importance of expressing yourself, and I'm like, you got to do it. If you are, I trust you all with your own your own understanding and like what's happening around you, context of like safety. If you cannot express yourself, then grain of salt, right? Like safety first, always. But let's get into how to be more creative with divergent thinking. So just a recap, Han et al., a person in this document on the neural correlates of creativity, argue that creativity is strongly associated with novelty and surprise. They are obviously related. Another researcher claimed that creativity is the ability to construct something that has novelty and appropriateness. Accordingly, novelty and usefulness are essential elements of creativity. It is difficult to measure usefulness, and I did give a massive disclaimer. The entire last episode was about usefulness. It is not if your art or your creativity can be sold, right? Like that's useful relative to the dominant culture. It's a functional property. It's something built upon discipline and, gross and fine motor skills coming together, right, to produce something that is, coordinated and a genuine expression of self, So there are now the novelty aspects related to three types of creative thinking are divergent thinking, abstraction, and improvisation. So we're going to be covering divergent thinking today, abstraction, improvisation. Actually, we're also going to be covering abstraction too today. But the full improvisation I will be going into next time because I told you guys I wanted a really fun, lighthearted episode, and I'm a hell of an improver sometimes. So we're going to do improv next time. So novelty refers to finding similarities among apparently dissimilar objects through abstraction and generalization, connecting objects that seem unrelated or newly integrating previously learned processes. So novelty, anyone who studies linguistics is obviously going to rest heavily on metaphor, similes, associations. And you do actually have an association network, cortex, in your brain, right? And it is heavily involved in creativity. Also, the thing is everything in your brain is linked by association. So strong associations. And there was, I was reading Time article when I was doing my collage, right? And it was talking about there's this thing called functional fixedness, where your brain will automatically link two things together, and that can be helpful for efficiency. However, when it comes to flexible thinking, divergent thinking, it can be sort of an issue, because you're like, oh, I can only use this thing for this purpose. I can only use this word in this way. I can only use, this music or this chord in this way. Well, if you're producing music and you have functional fixedness, I imagine that is incredibly hard to work with. So actually listen in then. You think that things can only be used for certain things, right? And the thing is when it comes to, patriarchal roles, white supremacy roles, respectability politics, if you're taking on a role, right, and you're like, I'm only the type of person who does this, I'm not the type of person who does that, that is, you have a fixed mindset. So you need to get a bit loosey-goosey. I did do an episode on flow state and, embodying someone else's sort of mannerisms and characteristics so you can expand your range, right? Your range of capabilities. It's not to say, change who you are fundamentally. It's just, expanding your range of movements, thought patterns, right? Just to give you more variety, as it is the spice of life, and it is novel, new. Beyond your default mode network is your saliency network, right? And so it's kind of like a crown. So when something gets really interesting, it like kind of does a double bounce, and it makes it more memorable. But yes. So many researchers rely on only two criteria, such as novelty and usefulness. Others argue that these could be insufficient and must be augmented by a third criterion, i.e. surprise, to measure the unexpectedness of a novel design. So the thing is like I've said before, surprise is the emotion most associated with learning. So you're going to have to keep learning and growing, right? That is necessary to being creative, right? Experimenting, actively doing. We are going to talk about sensory motor integration, right? Taking in senses like vision, like sound, right? Taste, smell, and also the internal senses, right? So the use of novelty and usefulness as criteria is clouded by cultural differences. I'm actually so happy that someone finally in a research paper on creativity and expression mentioned cultural differences, because the thing is emotions are also a type of obviously expression, and sometimes you'll read research papers on emotions where they like mix emotions from across cultures, and I'm like, whoa. These two cultures do not have the same definition of happiness. These two cultures do not have the same definition of this. Using them interchangeably, I'm just happy that someone acknowledged cultural differences. So a researcher in this article debated that creativity is related to the three types of surprise. First involves unfamiliar assembly combinations of familiar ideas. Example, poetic imagery, paintings, textile collages. Ain't that funny? I did a collage. And analogies. Oh, I love analogies, right? Comparing two things. Well, this is a simile. Using like or as to compare two things. No, is that a metaphor or a simile? But yeah, anyway. So analogies. These novel mixtures can be generated either intentionally, deliberately, or automatically, spontaneously. The second type of surprise involves developing an unexpected idea that may fit into a style of thinking that the person had already. And then the third involves astonishment, which could endanger other ideas that a person thought were equally impossible. So that is going to be error prediction, right? A lot of us, since we incorporate our stats when we're like using working memory, if you're always in a context where you have to be right, you won't get to experience the actual astonishment, the joy, the excitement that can come from being proven wrong, right? So I did a couple episodes ago, I'm going to link it down below, recommended a book on anxiety. And anxiety is like an arousal state that branches off into there's an arousal state. It branches off into anxiety versus excitement, right? And so the thing is if you don't want to be, proven wrong, you don't want to actually kind of be astonished, and astonishment is a very high level of surprise, it's going to make you more anxious, right? And it's going to kind of feel threatening. However, if you do enjoy being wrong, as I do a lot, because the thing is I get to be amazed often, you get to be excited, right? So it's just a matter of perspective and how you manage, anxiety and incorporating feedback and what the goal is. So I will link that below. So these are the areas of the brain that are essential to divergent thinking: the prefrontal cortex, the central brain region for several executive functions. It plays a vital role in creative ideation and problem solving by providing a control mechanism. It's proposed that the PFC provides control mechanisms through lifelong learning with transfer and savings through gating and memory, similar to grow when required algorithms. And the thing is a lot of people do fear change. However, the thing is change is often growth. So if you fear change and you kind of have an assumption of permanence, we are everything, your body, the earth is constantly changing. So if you fear change, you may fear growth, and so you may not feel compelled to learn. So always keep learning, right? This learning. Okay, so. Yes, so this learning rule refers to creating new schemas when preserving and utilizing old ones. Another researcher suggested a computational framework model incorporating hierarchical gating to model the PFC's ability to flexibly encode and use multiple disparate schemas. Okay, this gating leads to transfer learning and robust memory saving, forming a more potent control mechanism. So leads to transfer learning, right? Like I talked about last time, being able to transfer your skills over. A lot of people think that, I can't be creative. You have the skills. You do have the skills. You need to transfer them over by first claiming authority, right? Transfer them to you. They are your skills. But the thing is if you'll notice, I talked about this before. So I'm integrating all information as, this is what I do. So when it comes to, if you're trying to find a hobby and you're like, well, I don't want to learn something new. Most of the time you don't have to learn something new, especially if you have a career in like a science or anything, really, actually any career. Like there's always a parallel that you could draw. Like if you're in programming, get into like knitting, crochet, like textile arts, fiber arts, right? It is very complex math that so you actually do have transferable skills when it comes to the arts. I'm going to say like 3 of the science books that I have in front of me right now, every single one makes a reference to magicians, because that's what you got to do. Whenever a scientist is coming up with an analogy, they're always like, it's like magic, and it's like, so if you're like a scientist, you could be a magician, right? Because most stage magic is misdirection and physics. If you know physics and basic psychology, then you could I'm saying you have the skills. You just know how to transfer them over. Okay? So, thinking about novel solutions can also activate distant or loosely connected neurons in semantic networks involving the hippocampus. Memory. Intrinsically, novelty per se can integrate previous knowledge in a novel manner, such as motor plans in the basal ganglia, which is essential in the motor sequencing process. So, integrate previous knowledge in a novel manner. We are talking about integrating. Sarah, why do you keep referencing yourself? Because the thing is I'm breaking everything down into parts. So we're differentiating, we're showing derivatives, right? And then we're integrating it all together to create something new. Because what we value, the neuroscience of choice and change. Working memory is stats and calc. And so calculus is the fundamental study of change, right? And so integration is a huge part of calc. Working memory, I'm constantly updating my working memory. Huge lover of math. I'm integrating everything, so I will go over stuff a bunch because we're integrating new parts. There's also, for divergent thinking, the cerebellum. It's essential in motor learning and control, particularly for the precise control of movements. It uses signals from the surrounding brain regions to learn and process sensory motor information from the associative sensory cortex and the PFC. So we have associations and control, right? Because the PFC has control mechanisms, right? And so like you're controlling which associations are being made and where. You are purposefully directing something or you know what I'm saying? So you're doing physics in your brain to create something new, or chemistry, right? To create something new. You're doing math to create something new. Hence, it regulates the initiation, intensity, and duration of motor acts in an anticipatory manner. Apart from its role in motor timing and control, highlighted that the surface area of the human cerebellum cortex is more tightly folded than the cerebral cortex, and that the human cerebellum comprises almost 78% of the surface area of the neocortex. Anyway, in addition to motor motor control, the cerebellum might also involve higher order executive functions, although some studies on creativity have indicated that visual divergent thinking is associated with the cerebellum. The mechanistic role of the cerebellum in visual divergent thinking remains unclear. So they're talking about visual divergent thinking associated with the cerebellum. The cerebellum does signals from the surrounding brain regions to learn and process. It's associative sensory cortex and the PFC. So associations, coordinations, control, visual, motor. We're talking about they're actually hand-eye coordination, right? Like coordinating skills, coordinated movements. You see something coming. The thing is the corpus callosum, the thing that kind of connects both the hemispheres of the brain. It's important for threading a needle, catching a baseball, right? It's hand-eye coordination, right? And so it's the two sides of the brain are like coming together. And so also there's the cerebellum incorporated. It's just anyway, I wish scientists would talk to each other. So given these considerations, we propose a computational neural model for 3 fundamental dimensions of creativity: divergent thinking, abstraction, and improvisation-based novelty. So the proposed model comprises 5 brain areas: prefrontal cortex, sensory associative cortex, hippocampus, memory, basal ganglia, and cerebellum. Those are the 2 implicated in movement. So when it comes to being creative, there are two systems that predominantly involve movement generation, coordinating movements, associating. So you do have to apply this. This is not just something you learn. Anyway, so these networks are modulated by dopamine, which can be segregated based on functional and structural organization into different pathways. Therefore, we argue that these brain regions represent key hubs for processing underlying creative cognition. That's great. So, divergent thinking, convergent thinking, lateral thinking. There's 2 types of creative thinking: creative idea generation, creative problem solving. And these are 2 critical cognitive processes: coming up with an idea and solving a problem. So divergent thinking, it's a dimension of creativity which refers to searching for multiple solutions to a single open-ended problem. Example, we might think divergently when designing a novel product or writing an imaginary fictional story. Right? You're writing a story and you're like, well, what's my character's issue? Like, what's their issue that they're trying to solve? They have to slay a dragon, but, they also have to, I don't know. I'm great at improv, guys. Anyway, so in contrast, convergent thinking is used for well-defined problems with unique correct solutions, such as spelling an unknown word or calculating company profits from the previous quarter. Consequently, convergent thinking has been described as focused because it clarifies all available and relevant data into a single solution. In other words, convergent thinking is relating to finding conventional and correct ideas and solutions rather than original options. It's making the right choice given the context. So questionable whether divergent thinking and convergent thinking can occur simultaneously. By one researcher, postulated optimal balance between these 2 modes of thinking. So you have to kind of balance it out. And if you're in UI, UX, and you're like, are you about to talk about the double diamond? I will. How did you know? But I just had to tell you that because I know that people who in UI, UX are like, say it already. Say it. Okay. Similarly, Brophy, who is a researcher for this article, argued that creative problems require alternating from divergent thinking to convergent thinking at the right time. Nevertheless, only a minority of people can do both with an adequate balance. So, I am going to blow smoke up my own butt for a second. We're going to go on a Sarah brain adventure. What I'm about to discuss is related, but also the path I'm about to take is very meta when it comes to switching between divergent thinking and convergent thinking. So I want you to listen to what I'm saying and see when I'm doing divergent thinking versus convergent thinking, right? To come up with the right answer to this problem. It will come full circle. So I'm going to be... just look for the diverging, converging on a point to make new meaning. So pay attention. So Brophy just said that creative problems require alternating from divergent thinking to convergent thinking at the right time. Let's focus on alternating and timing. Where would we find those concepts together, right? Association network. So, and then also in real life, where would we find those concepts together? We could get into the realm of physics and electrical engineering. We could talk about the time period of an AC current. For physics and electrical engineering, there is alternating current, an electric current that periodically reverses direction. It is described by a waveform, and its behavior is measured in terms of its time period. So you have time period, frequency, and formula. The time period of an alternating current signal can be calculated using the formula time equals 1 over frequency. So that's one example. That's an association that I just made. We can also discuss alternating and timing in the field of scheduling and co-parenting. Alternating week schedule, 50-50 split of time. You know, there's also alternating weekends, a schedule where a child spends time with a non-custodial parent every other weekend. This can be combined with other arrangements such as, weekday visits to adjust the time sharing percentage. So I am going with all associations of time and alternating together. So we can also go to the realm of computer science, alternating time temporal logic, ATL, a logic that describes computations in systems where multiple players alternate moves, such as in a concurrent game. It is used in computer science to check for properties of multi-agent systems. So what I just did there is I heard the terms alternating and time, and I said in my brain, where do I know where alternating and time are used together? And I can give an example in physics and electrical engineering, co-parenting, and computer science. However, we're going this computer science route as it is right relative to what I'm about to explain. So, alternating time temporal logic in computer science. Temporal logic comes in two varieties. Linear time temporal logic assumes implicit universal quantification over all paths that are generated by the execution of a system. Branching time temporal logic allows explicit existential and universal quantification over all paths. And if you're like, Sarah, I'm not catching any of this, I understand. This is just, I have to clarify because there are computer science people who follow me, and I love when I get to talk about something and someone's like, oh my God, you've never talked about computer science. So if you're like, it's just the meta point I'm trying to make is that I'm associating and then I'm using computer science to explain my point. Am I saying that the human brain is a computer? No, I'm saying that we're discussing alternating time logic, right? And so computer science does have a parallel that can go beneath our understanding to kind of support our understanding. And this is how you think creatively, right? How you diverge thinking. Yes, so I'm explaining and showing you how it's done. So I'm going to keep going. We introduce a third, more general variety of temporal logic. Alternating time temporal logic offers selective quantification over those paths that are possible outcomes of games, such as the game in which the system and the environment alternate moves. So, secret third thing. It's always a secret third thing. While linear time and branching time logics are natural specification languages for closed systems, alternating time logics are natural specification languages for open systems. So, now we're going to do another association, okay? Note, the human body is an open system because it constantly exchanges both matter and energy with its environment. It takes in inputs like food, water, and oxygen, releases outputs like carbon dioxide, waste, and heat. A closed system, by contrast, is isolated from its environment and does not exchange matter or energy. Why did I mention the human body being an open system? Because they're discussing alternating time logics are natural specification languages for open systems, okay? The system and the environment alternate moves. We alternate with the environment right now, okay? So also note, the brain is not a closed system. It does have a protective barrier that makes it selectively closed to certain substances. It receives sensory input from the external world and requires energy and nutrients from the body, making a constant exchange with its surroundings essential for function. Also note how I said this is going to bring in something else. I do not have an internal monologue. Human language is linear and sequential in nature, as opposed to global, holistic, and simultaneous. I am taking a global, holistic approach to understanding, to explaining divergent thought, as that is what's necessary, okay? Two roads diverge in a wood, and I took the one less traveled. For me, two roads diverge in the wood, and I split myself in half and walk down both of them right now. Okay? So that's what I'm trying to say. So human language is linear. It unfolds over time such that various aspects of the total message necessary for successful interpretation are distributed over the various temporal phases of the communication event, right? Episodic memory, right? Autobiographical memory. The story of your life, you take her home, I drive all night to keep her warm. Okay, so the story of your life, right? English follows like a linear narrative flow. That being said, human language is linear. Life is not. And when I was writing this, I just realized this is why therapists have to keep stressing. Grief is not linear. It's because people flatten life and loss into this, 2D concept, right? Linear dimensions are any dimensions that are strictly horizontal or vertical. But like I was talking about with the importance of creativity, depth, okay? Life has depth. If you want to find meaning, depth, creativity, expression, it's all going to be in the creative, expressive dimension. If you'd like to flatten everything and make it linear and easier to understand, you don't want to think divergently, then that's your choice. Anyway, so we're going to talk about how the brain deals with certain words. Because the thing is there's different weights to different words. This is really cool because I asked people on my Instagram story, since I do not have an internal monologue, and I wanted to understand people's internal monologue. If you sent me I asked the question, people with an internal monologue, I need your help. Can you type out the most common phrase you say to yourself? Please don't edit it. Please type it exactly how it's said in your head, the phrase or sentence. And people did. And I collected the data, and here's an example. So what I was looking for when people typed out, what they repeat to themselves most in their head is the tense, what tense the sentence is in English. Ideally, for your brain, when it comes to internal monologue, the most repeated phrase, not all the time, the most repeated phrase should be in present tense, right? Because the thing is when you imagine yourself, right, when you picture yourself in like different times, you are mentally time traveling. And the thing is you can also experience painful things if you imagine yourself during that event often, right? So the issue when it comes to a lot of people's phrase that they repeat to themselves in their head is it happens with a lot of continuous tenses, most of which cannot be changed to passive voice. So they are considered active and could be ongoing, right? So if you're saying something in your head that's in a continuous tense, right, like it's considered active, ongoing. And also the thing is what most people are saying to themselves were also commands, right? So you're telling yourself to do something. And we're going to talk about the weight, how your brain encodes verbs, okay? So active sentences are processed faster and more directly. Passive sentences require more energy to understand as you have to convert the entire sentence to comprehend. The brain is wired for efficiency being time times energy. And a lot of the phrases that people used, well, actually all of them, contain time and energy. They're high repetition, and then they're passive versus active voice. So I needed that. Thank you, anyone who sent me what your internal monologue is saying. I'm realizing some of the phrases being repeated are making a lot of people mentally time travel and kind of slowing down some things. Because the thing is I'll explain. You know what? I'm going to just do a full episode on internal monologue. So we're going to talk about sensory motor experience and verb category mapping in human sensory motor and parietal neurons. So semantic grounding, conceptual grounding, is the process of relating meaning to symbols, words. It is the foundation for creating a representational symbolic system such as language. Semantic grounding for verb meaning is hypothesized to be achieved through two mechanisms: sensory motor mapping, directly encoding the sensory motor experiences the verb describes, and verb category mapping, i.e. encoding the abstract category a verb belongs to. So when it comes to divergent thinking, right, and I talked about people, telling themselves over and over and over again, pay attention to the verbs, because the verbs are going to get encoded in a very interesting way. This is now going to involve embodied, cognition, embodied understanding, movement, because we're talking about movement. So these two mechanisms were investigated by examining neuronal level spikes, neuronal action potentials, activities from the motor, somatosensory, and parietal areas in 2 human participants. There's also another study. You're like, 2? I hear you. Motor and a portion of somatosensory neurons were found to be involved in primarily sensory motor mapping, while parietal and some somatosensory neurons were found to be involved in both sensory motor and verb category mapping. The time course of the spike activities and the selective tuning pattern of these neurons indicate that they belong to a large neural network used for semantic processing. This study is the first step towards understanding how words are processed by neurons. So your sensory motor cortex maps verbs. Verbs are action words. They move. You represent those movements and conceptually ground them. You add weight, embodied understanding, by doing. A while back, I did ask teachers, this is actually going to piss me off, so guys, get into this. A while back, I asked teachers which class, they see neurodivergent kids stimming the most. Most said math class. Do you want to know the verbs in math? Add, subtract, multiply, divide, expand, simplify, factor, solve, evaluate. Math class is mostly verbs, right? And you're integrating sensory motor experience. Bridging, like bringing in childhood development, the appendages that kids perform basic math on are your fingers, right? So notice that the neurodivergent kids are doing sensory motor integration, right? And neurodivergent kids have heightened sensory awareness, right? And complex motor patterns as a result, right? So they're stimming predominantly in math class. Math class is predominantly verbs. Add, subtract, divide, multiply, expand, solve. Those are verbs, right? Okay. So you also have to look at the position. Most kids are in class, sitting down, trying their best to remain still. So there's something inhibiting action. And so now they have to kind of stim off to the side. But basically in math class, you're mentally sprinting, right? Because the entire class is made up of solving stuff. Adding, subtracting, all this stuff are verbs, right? And so sensory motor integration, right? This is divergent thinking. It's how to be more creative. Abstraction. Do you want to know the most abstract thing you can do? Math, right? Okay. So when it comes to verbs, there's going to be movement involved. Divergent thinking, doing. If you're divergently thinking, you're divergently moving. You're convergently thinking, you're coming together. Also lateral thinking, there's going to be lateral movements, right? So you're going to have to move mind and body, perform, think differently, move differently. What did piss me off about stimming doesn't piss me off. What pisses me off is that there's studies coming out about how to improve working memory for older populations that involves alternating hand exercises. Alternating. Coordinated movements, right? Thumb to finger taps, touching your thumb to each finger in sequence, then reverse, hand shape alteration, one hand to fist, the other to point, and switching, and finger walks, walking fingers one at a time across the surface or in the air. These exercises improve working memory by engaging both hemispheres of the brain and strengthening neural connections through bilateral coordination and fine motor skills. So they're moving their hands in coordinated ways to improve their working memory, which is math. Notice that the neurodivergent kids are stimming the most in math, right? Moving their hands. So what pisses me off is that what helps older people's working memory is literally repurposed stimming. Like I'm going to actually include the research, right, for the hand movements. That is stimming. So what is discouraged from neurodivergent kids is encouraged in older populations to improve their working memory. Let the kids stim, or I swear to fucking God. Okay. So yeah. Going back to, again, we're converging, we're going back. Alternating time temporal logic. For example, by preceding the temporal operator eventually with a selective path quantifier, we can specify that the game, blah, 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 blah. So every state transition of a concurrent game structure results from a choice of moves, one for each player. The player represents individual components in the environment of an open system. Concurrent game structures can capture various forms of synchronous composition for open systems, and if augmented with fairness constraints, also asynchronous composition. You know what has so the thing is your brain is not perfectly symmetrical. There's actually a bit more torque on the right side. Oh my God. I read a fucking research article about how they were like, the torque in the brain is not the same as torque in physics. I was like, it fucking is. Oh my God. Anyway, why would okay. But so yeah. They're talking about, in the case of ATL, the alternate temporal logic, the model checking problem is closely related to the synthesis problem for linear time formulas and requires doubly exponential time. So basically, synthesis is the process of combining separate elements to form a complex whole. It can involve chemical reactions to create new compounds, integrating multiple ideas. What did I just do? Or sources to form a new concept, or combining parts in biology to create a functional whole. Synthesis and creativity are deeply connected. Creative synthesis is the process of combining existing ideas, information, and perspectives to form a new complex whole. That is what I just did. We could co-parent this. We could go electrical engineering. We could go computer science when it comes to alternates and timing, right? And both of those can give us a pretty it can give you a machine, it can give you a human, it can give you just the basic laws of nature approach to alternating and timing. And some even involve electrical currents, right? And so we're talking about creativity in the brain, electrical currents in your brain. So you can pretty much just kind of layer understanding. Everything in the brain is linked by association. So many things apply, right? So that being said, let's circle back all the way back to a neurocomputational model of creative processes. Importantly, divergent thinking can be reliably tested with the alternate use test, which is among the most frequently used assessment methods and provides valuable information on creativity. The alternate use test is prominent divergent thinking task, though not the only one, through which creative new uses for everyday objects can be found, such as bricks or car tires. For example, the alternate use test is used for concrete items, bricks or car tires, right? Other prevalent divergent thinking tasks require experimental participants to imagine the consequences of ultimate situations, propose product improvements, create abstract figures, or produce creative metaphors and humorous puns. So in other words, abstract concepts. They have a creativity test for the concrete and then the abstract. You got to bring them together, right? Sensory motor integration. So that's what AI cannot do. Other prevalent divergent thinking tasks require experimental participants to imagine the... Okay, I already read that. Moreover, divergent thinking related task performance is usually scored quantitatively and qualitatively. Quantitative scoring measures the following indices. Total number of responses, fluency, the number of responses from different categories, flexibility, and the number of original ideas, originality produced at a given time. So fluency, I just discussed electrical engineering, co-parenting, and computer science, and they're analogous. Analogous means similar in some respects. Respect is a value, right? So they're similar in values. So I just lined up a parallel with 3, right? And then flexibility, I flexibly alternated between, we could go the co-parenting route, and then originality. Have you ever seen anyone do a side-by, and I am blowing smoke up my own ass for this. For electrical engineering, co-parenting, and computer science, alternating temporal logic. And if you're like, that's so cool, and I would love to meet that person. So by comparison, creative quality is commonly evaluated by raters, tabulated norms, or statistical infrequency analysis, which relies on finding a word linked to unrelated words and multiple insight problems. Additional studies suggest that there are other players. That's an interesting word, considering we just talked about alternating time temporal logic, which has to do with alternating players in creative thinking. So De Bono, who is a source cited in the study, claimed that random stimulation could prompt people to realize new patterns and restructure problems, thus engaging in lateral thinking. Random stimulation. Now, you don't have to, get electrical shocks. You could literally just go for a walk, a run. That's, alternating, right? Human locomotion. You're alternating. It's cool. In the book, this is what it sounds like. Most people walk on a 4/4 time. It's so interesting. And the thing is there's also a book on language development. So this is lateral thinking is something that I do. I do lateral learning, and I'm about to show you how I do that. I go interdisciplinary, and so the thing is I'm reading this book right now called This Is What It Sounds Like, and it talks about your brain and your music preferences. And there's a whole chapter on rhythm, right? And rhythm is feel. And then I also have another book on language development, and it talks about what humans, babies in the womb in utero, first get a sense of is rhythm and intonation, right? Feeling. Okay? So that is how I line up. That is a lateral thinking, right? I'm talking about language development and music. Now, you use all parts of your brain, across hemispheres to communicate. However, language development, language acquisition, you're more going to be in the left hemisphere. However, when it comes to music and prosody, right, you're more going to be in the right. So I am connecting laterally, bilateral connection, language and like literal language, and then music. I mean, the thing is I'm talking rhythm and intonation, but when it also does discuss like the words and how they're assembled. It's just cool. You can do both hemispheres. You go like the science math route on one side, and then you do the purely artistic thing. The thing is that they both involve both hemispheres of the brain. I read laterally. I think laterally. I am threading the needle, and threading the needle is a skill that rests on the corpus callosum that facilitates communication between both hemispheres of the brain. I'm talking about divergent thinking, ability to switch is what we're doing here. Strengthening connections. So, I do lateral learning. I alternate between related subjects and books to find their common ground, their through line, their punch line. If you're a lot of people, well, when you're in comedy, you juxtaposition, right? Contrast. Artists, you know what's happening here. Poets, you know what's happening here. Contrast is a lot of times when people think me versus other, right? They're thinking in black and white. However, when it comes to creative thinking, you don't think of yourself as, well, actually, this is funny. Well, no. You're not like, this is a black and white thing. You're comparing and you're finding the meaning, the contrast between them, right? You're not like pitting them against each other. They're complementing each other. They're complementing each other. They're collaborating, right? The juxtaposition. Comfort the disturbed, disturb the comfortable. And the thing is disturbing and comfort involves like movement, right? You're, oh God, they're being repelled from something in a horrifying manner. Or they're being comforted, soothed. It's catharsis. It's like relaxation. So, yeah. Anyway, I also do often create novel metaphors to make information click. The click feeling in your head is literally describing the process of synchronicity. If you've ever said, Sarah, you just made something click, you're describing the feeling of synchronicity. That is aligning understanding. Let's continue. And synchronicity, again, synthesis, synchronicity, it's all important to creativity. So researchers showed that lateral thinking might be rarer than previously expected, and that if one decides to think outside the box, it might make sense to at least try to think nearby. So if you have a hard time thinking outside the box, think right next to the box, which means you're going to need an analogy, a simile, a metaphor, an association, right? Synonyms, antonyms, it's opposite. There's part to whole analogies, like finger to hand. It's like kind of similar. It's like, so finger is nearby to hand. Sure, the finger is a part of your hand, but you can use hand and finger as a part to whole. Part to whole. Sorry, analogy. There's also cause and effect, right? Example, practice, improve. You can use those. Those are analogies. You want to practice and think outside the box. You're going to want to improve. Okay, so object to purpose analogy, key to lock, right? This is the key to unlock your creativity. Oh, that's an association. right? It's an analogy. Other categories include characteristics like chili pepper, spicy, right? This is kind of funny because that's like the realm of scent is always used with taste. Scent and sound actually do interact a lot. But there's also tool to action analogies, crayon to draw. You're going to need to, the thing is everything is linked by association. How tool to action, crayon to draw, right, is you have the thing, but you're going to have to move it, right? And then source to product analogies, milk to cheese. You want to have a life worth living. Worth is related to respect, right? Self-respect is going to be developed by creative expression, respecting who you are as an artist, taking yourself seriously, taking other artists seriously. That's how respect gets established. And then the thing is you're like, I don't want to be creative. I don't want to express myself. I want to be like everyone else. That's good and that's fine. So I also am incorporating everything from previous episodes. The reason why most people have a midlife crisis, they stopped playing. They stopped expressing themselves. They only committed to the role, right? They went to work every day. They were a good mom or dad, right? And then they retired. Their kids moved out. They didn't have work to define them anymore. Their role no longer defined them. And you know what they did? They start buying cars and, toys and shit they don't actually need to fulfill them because what are they doing? They are picking up right where they left off. Because before they entered the workforce, right, their mom and dad or whatever, society was like, stop playing with that. Adults don't play with they don't play with cars. They don't play with Hot Wheels. And you know what? They paused at that point, right? They paused. They stopped playing expression, artistic expression, right? Whatever. They paused in childhood. And then once they were stopped being defined by this role, work, they were like, oh my God, I'm going to pick back up on play. However, it's not as fulfilling, right? They keep buying stuff. Oh, because capitalism has kind of commandeered their understanding of usefulness, right? Of expression. It's all tangible products. The reward is not within. It is external. And the external rewards are not fulfilling at this point, right? If you read any book on, the thing is actually you could read, this is what it sounds like. Novelty, newness, is talking about risk, right? When it comes to most people's regrets when they're kids, it's what they did do. However, that switches when you're an adult, when you get older, right? You watch any sort of like sentimental think piece from inside of a retirement home. Most of the regrets are what people did not do, right? What they didn't say, what they didn't pursue, what they didn't invest in their art or their growth, right? Because they didn't want to take the risk. Because risk, right? Oh, I could lose don't do stuff that makes you lose your job constantly. Like, don't risk that. But risk like what? Respect from the dominant culture, right? Oh, if I express myself, if I dye my hair, if I get an ear piercing, if I wear funky glasses to work, like what will my coworkers say? Who cares? They're already being haunted by themselves. If anyone is like, just what happens after we die? What happens after we die? That person is like pressing that record down and just express yourself, lest you slowly start to press your record. You know what I mean? So, yeah. Lateral thinking. So researchers showed that lateral thinking might be rarer than previously expected. And if that one decides to think outside, yeah. So you think nearby, metaphor, simile, association. This is now the realm of the association network, which is crucial for creativity. Everything in the brain is linked by association. Let's keep it moving. Because there is no adequate neurological data on convergent thinking and lateral thinking neural substrates compared with divergent thinking, we mainly focus on divergent thinking rather than convergent thinking and lateral thinking in addition reasons. Oh my God. What? Scientific research only has information on divergent thinking? Yeah, of course, because you guys only differentiate, right? These are not the same. This is what I was talking about in the beginning with the issue with a lot of the research that I saw. It's like, this is all different from this. However, we're only focusing on the central nervous system. Meanwhile, the actual answer to the problem is from the peripheral nervous system. The head and the body are not separate, right? You separated the arbitrary separation of central and peripheral nervous system, okay? Half of the research projects, and God bless these people, they're doing incredible research, but half of these research projects, right, they were focusing on the central nervous system, but there was something involving hunger. Hunger is going to be mainly from the peripheral nervous system. So you've made this arbitrary separation and you have not integrated them together. So of course, there's not going to be a lot of research on convergent and lateral thinking. Also lateral thinking, lateral learning, which I'm doing, I'm going across subjects. That is not how you teach in the current school system. Yes, there are different subjects, but getting interdisciplinary is like frowned upon. I know it's like slowly starting to happen and pick up, but it's, of course, there's not going to be as much research. So we're just going to start riffing, okay? But this will be how I learn. Okay, so anyway, circling back to the research, there is substantial evidence that divergent thinking ability has a considerable function in diverse domain-specific forms of creativity. It's been demonstrated that divergent thinking ability can predict the creativity of humor production and intelligence. So, again, way back in the day, you have to be smart to be funny, to be genuinely funny. Mathematical creativity. This is what divergent thinking, right, demonstrated that it can predict creativity of humor production and intelligence. Mathematical creativity. Did I not just think incredibly abstractly? I'm sorry, I'm going to blow smoke up my own butt because this is what I have been doing. This is probably the episode I feel the most confident in myself I've ever felt. Okay? Mathematical competence, narrative creativity, and story writing. Second, divergent thinking is also a predictor of creative lifetime achievements. I'm so sorry, I'm going to blow smoke up my butt. How long have I been a content creator? But so third, studies focusing on specific domains have reported that divergent thinking ability predicts levels or creative accomplishment in advertising and improvisation. So I am going to suck my own dick again. I have had a decent amount of success in advertising as I was the copywriter for Denny's Twitter and Tumblr. And yeah, also I do improv pretty well. So yes, when I say creativity of humor production and intelligence, mathematical creativity, mathematical competence, narrative creativity, story writing, advertising, improv, boom, 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 boom. So research continued. Previous studies have revealed a direct correlation between the default mode network, right, self-image, music preferences, all this stuff, and divergent thinking. And so like I talked about, right, you suppress your expression, your creativity, your emotions. You're pressing down the default mode network, okay? So divergent thinking, you think differently, okay? So this network is an assembly of brain regions that are mainly involved in self-generated thought, internal speech, and divergent thinking. Similarly, it has been suggested that brain regions related to the executive control network and default mode network are involved during musical improvisation, your music preferences. The ECN is typically involved in top-down control, whereas the default mode network is mainly involved in self-generated thought, which can either be spontaneous, mind-wandering, or goal-directed mental navigation. So spontaneous, mind-wandering, literally like letting yourself wander, right? So if you have a bunch of constraints on yourself, mental constraints, I'm not the type of person who does this. Oh, no. I couldn't wear that. No, I can't do art because I'm bad at it. You're not letting yourself imagine. Let yourself mind wander. Because the thing is, your brain uses the same cognitive map to map physical and social context, right? So you're like, oh, I can't do this in this situation. Okay. Anyway, I'm sorry. And goal-directed, which is mental navigation. Navigation is perception plus memory. I have done navigation. And also the thing is when it comes to navigation, the patriarchy uses mainly dead reckoning, and dead reckoning does not account for wind, water, and landmarks. And in my analogy that I use, wind, water, and landmarks are emotions and other people's identities, right? So do not take navigation advice, a certain type of creative, from the patriarchy, right? I mean, men, the thing is men, not all men. I'm actually being dead serious right now. If you're like, oh, I should, care about how the patriarchy judges me when I create and I express myself. So mental navigation, they literally navigate by dead reckoning, which ignores emotions and identity, which is other people's landmarks. It represents identity. So maybe not. Again, circling back to the way beginning, women and across the globe have pioneered creativity in every single arena. If you want to look to be inspired, you need to value women, femininity, which is not the same as being a woman, and look to them. Men, I mean, sure, there's a lot of great artists who are men. Yes, absolutely. But when it comes to being judged by the dominant culture, they are part of the fandom or the critics, right? They are not the artists most of the time. Again, differentiating between who you want to judge you and applying weight differently. Okay, so yes, finally, levels of divergent thinking are higher in professional dancers compared to novices. So dancers, what do? They move. Oh, they move. So again, movement. Therefore, we elaborate on divergent thinking in the following sections. In terms of brain structure and function, we argue that certain brain regions are involved in the neurocomputational model during divergent thinking. The prefrontal cortex, control. The hippocampus, memory. Basal ganglia and cerebellum, movement. And modulated by dopamine. The prefrontal cortex plays a role in creative ideation and problem solving by providing a control mechanism, hippocampus necessary for semantic network due to its functional role in generalization, so right, memory, associations, and all this stuff. Basal ganglia plays a role in novelty detection signals and sequential learning, right? Is this new relative to me? And so the thing is if you're going to mind wander, I need you to actually also start picturing. If you're like new to mind wandering, don't go, okay, I'm going to go to a cafe. If you're new to mind wandering, you let yourself actually creatively mind wander. Imagine literally one foot in front of the other, right? Imagine yourself opening the front door, walking down the hallway, the steps, outside to the right, right? Imagine the locomotion, the sequential movements, right? When you're mind wandering. If you're a professional mind wanderer, you don't even have to do this. But I'm saying if you want to allow yourself to wander, get the gross motor skills before you like fine tune the image, okay? So the cerebellum provides precise gain and timing control of movements, precise gain and timing control, and then, which is a particular requirement for musical creativity. So gain and timing control of movements, you're talking about most of the elements of music in general. So it's all on the default mode network. That being said, there is a very popular model for divergent, convergent, and lateral thinking that is commonly used in an area concerned with individual experience and design, creativity, UI, UX, the famous double diamond. So I'm going to say that this is a podcast and that what I'm about to describe is an image. You know what? I'm going to include the links to this podcast for the double diamond. The double diamond in this context that I'm going to link is UI, UX is a bit hard of a route to understand it. So there's this museum that implemented it for organizational layout of the actual museum and like problem solving within the museum. So you should look at it for the double diamond because it does divergent thinking and then it converges to a focus point. Then it diverges again and converges to like the solution. However, it goes from left to right. That's a lateral movement. Okay, so it's really great. And it's also what people who consider experience and expression and how people want to navigate the world, UI, UX designers have perfected. They are the people to look for. Oh, it's a type of hybrid profession, right? A science and an art. I digress. Anyway, but yeah, for now, I'm going to give you my favorite tips on divergent thinking. Synonyms, associations are vital to understand. When reading, learning, periodically check synonyms, especially for verbs, right? Okay? Lateral learning. Get interdisciplinary and learn how to weave. Literally or figuratively, with books or like get a loom. No, looms are incredibly expensive, but weaving is cool. So a source, I am going to link a source from this lady on TikTok who did her master's thesis on metaphor and the importance of reading 2 books at once and weaving together the information, right? So it usually helps, it really helps to go from a science to an art, right? Because the thing is like something very technical and then something very like expressive, making it interdisciplinary. I'm going to give an example with all the books that I brought. And then it does help if you're in the sciences or just any more academia and you want to get more creative, like anything academia. You should know which fields of study are neighbors. This is the realm of science convergence. Science convergence. So you get a global map of the sciences, the full picture, and we really do need more of it. And I'm actually going to link information below. It's a global map of the sciences, who's related to who is a half step over, who is a step to the right, who's a step up, who's a step down, right? And so the thing is you're creating a mental map, right? Most of them. The thing is like I talked about, why I don't fear learning chemistry as much is because most of chemistry, all the math involved is like algebra. And so if you know the abstract parts of chemistry, right, you know the basic, algebra gives you a map. Chemistry is not going to steer that far off course when it comes to algebra. If chemists literally come up with a new algebraic expression, function, that is incredible. But like for the most part, the roots has already been established. So you just put the chemistry on top of the math, right? And that's levels of abstraction, you know? It goes concrete to abstract. And that's cool. So then I just want to kind of tie this all together. The aha moments. So this is the elusive brain science of aha moments. Our key result, an aha solution corresponds to a burst of high-frequency brain waves in the brain's right temporal lobe, just above the right ear. Okay, so that part of the brain, the right anterior superior temporal gyrus, connects with many other brain regions. It is associated with our ability to realize connections between concepts that may initially seem unrelated. How do you connect concepts that are unrelated? Synonyms, metaphors, similes, associations, right? All types of associations. As occurs when comprehending, grasping metaphors, right? Jokes and the gist of the conversation. So you have grasped the concept in the right hemisphere. What's cool about the double diamond is happening in your brain, right? You're basically doing a figure 8. You are making an association and it's wrapping up. The solution point is happening on the right side in the temporal lobe, right above the ear. Ain't that wild? Our findings linking this specific area of the brain to the aha experience supported previous work by Edward M. Bowden of the University of Wisconsin. Go Badgers. Oh, Parkside. Sorry. And Beeman suggested that the solution to such a problem can be unconsciously present in the right hemisphere, ready to emerge into awareness as an insight. Awareness, right? Awareness is mainly focusing on like just sensory motor integration, cerebellum, right? So everything that I just said, the aha moment, I've just basically laid out how to give you an aha moment in a creative way. And you're like, what, you took such a roundabout route? Yes, I did a figure 8. Aha. Anyway, so like I've been saying, right temporal lobe is involved in grasping concepts. And anywho, that is what I'm wrapping up with. Today's episode was super long. Oh, let me explain how I read. I really am sorry if this seems like I am sucking my own butt for the entirety of this episode. It is because the episode is how to be creative. I am creative with divergent thinking. I am neurodivergent, and it involves abstraction, humor, analogous solutions, understanding, check, right? Making sure to alternate. I consciously always alternate between a science and an art, right? With reading. So my best examples of getting interdisciplinary with a science and an art, of course, I have to. Your brain on art, how the arts transform us. This is neuroscience and art. Very meta, right? So this is going to be physics and art. The geometry of grief, reflections on mathematics, loss, and life. Math and grief, right? This is great for people who, understanding that grief is not linear, right? Because life is not. If you're looking for meaning to life and loss of life, right? Grief is deep. You can meaningfully integrate math and emotions. The Tao of Physics, an exploration of the parallels between modern physics and Eastern mysticism. This is just wild. There's talk about, the thing is this is going to talk about the realm. I've said this a million times. In the East, people mostly focus on awareness. In the West, we mostly focus on consciousness. However, the thing is they need each other, right? You're conscious and aware. Most people in the West think they're self-aware. Most of us are self-conscious. Most people don't know what awareness means. Anyway, the Tao, right? Tao is has heavy poetic undercurrents, emotions. Poems are emotions distilled and of physics. So the thing is emotions are follow the laws of physics. So it's the poetry of physics. So the physics of physics. But it's cool. And then we have the gentrification of the mind, witness to a lost imagination. I would especially get this if you're like, I want to be more creative and I feel like I am, stuck in this box, this like uninspired, plain white walls of just like mundane, it's all the monotonous routine of it all. Gentrification of the mind. Ungentrify your minds. On the art and craft of doing science, if you'd like to get really on the nose, it discusses aha moments in here and scientific discovery. The meaning of proofs, mathematics as storytelling, right? So storytelling is, you're talking about, again, with the creativity, talking about narration and mathematical innovation, mathematical competence. Again, very on the nose. The meaning of proofs, mathematics as storytelling. This is what it sounds like. This is a record producer who produced for Prince, who went over to neuroscience. So when I tell you that this is just like something to behold. And we're doing it in book club. It's incredible. Interdisciplinary. Also, I'm getting interdisciplinary, right? These books are literally interdisciplinary, so they're fusing two genres. Horror and architecture. Now, this is also relevant because it talks about horror is an emotion and architecture, right? And architects and composers are pretty cool people to study. But the thing is this also discusses haunting. And so the thing is the architecture of sound is, when you're talking about your sense of self, your self-image, it's also on that same network is your music preferences, right? The architecture of sound is the architecture of self, the music of self, how you, like what you prefer and how you move throughout the world. And so then horror and architecture, right? There's like a haunting element of this container, right? This building. You can immediately apply it to self. It's cool as hell. The botany of desire, right? Fascination, fascia. Some strawberries will fuse together. It's called fascia, right? Like the thing is fascia in the body, right, is connective tissue. It stabilizes muscles in movement, right? How do you boldly go into the unknown? What you're afraid of things is you follow not what is important, but what is fascinating, interesting to you, right? Fascination. When you move forward, you will feel stable in your movements because your fascination is what carries you. Your interests carry you. Be creative, express yourself. Let's keep it moving. This one is just, so let me tell you how I weave lateral learning. This is the story grid, what good editors know, and it's how to write a good story. On page 148, it says the Kubler-Ross change curve for story. And what exactly it says is shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, integration. The Kubler-Ross change curve for story is also the grief curve, right? You want to talk about how like life and grief, right? This is the story of your life, and the story of your life mirrors the grief curve, right? That's how you weave this together. You want to read two books at once? You want to know how to write your story? You want to know how to deal with grief? You want to know the math in between them? The story grid, what good editors know, how to make your life story worth living, and then also the geometry of grief, how to understand loss in your life, right? and how to keep going and make it worth living. How to integrate others' stories into your story, right? How to make a series, a sequel, right? And then we also have Humor by Terry Eagleton, which is the philosophy of humor. And when narcissism comes to church, healing your community from emotional and spiritual abuse. Why I have read these two together is a lot of pastors talk like comedians, right? Have you guys ever noticed how this is a lot like this? Now, the thing is when it comes to jokes can either be tendentious or non-tendentious, which means trying to convince someone of your often controversial opinion in a funny or whimsical way, right? And so the thing is like I talked with hypnotic speech patterns, actually, I didn't do a full episode on that yet. I'll get into it. Anyway, so like being in a group of people, right? Hearing and receiving a message together where everyone's moving and singing, right? It makes the message easier to receive. You feel part of a community. There's also, oh my God, this is how I weave books together. Why We Never Think Alone, that book. It's about how beliefs are made as a group, right? It's talking about cognitive division of labor. It is easier to accept harsh, horrible truths when you're with a group, when everyone is emotionally stirred in a deep, meaningful way, whether it be singing, laughing, or crying, right? So a lot of people who preach use exactly what the type of communication style that comedians do. And the thing is comedians are often assumed to be stupid, right? However, you'll notice there were comedians at the presidential inauguration. And every time people shit on the musicians who showed up to Trump's inauguration. However, they did not shit on the comedians because everyone thought that comedians were fucking dumb. However, the thing is comedians have jester's privilege, which is the privilege of the unheard. Jesters historically have advised kings on policies. They also can deliver a horrible message in a way that is less hurtful because they are making you laugh. So, you want to weave two concepts together. You'll also notice when narcissism comes to church, they talk about people who are personable, who are likable, who use community, communal movement to make people accept the message that you're gonna burn in hell for being gay. That's like the only people who could get away with that. So that's how I weave stuff together. Anyway, this episode has been super long. I do apologize. I'm so sorry. But thank you all for listening. Think divergently. Synonyms, associations, lateral thinking. Get into it, and then the next step is going to be on improv, and hopefully that episode is much shorter. Oh my God. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. Rate me 5 stars, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And the link to the book club will be linked below. Also, every single source will be linked below. Bye, guys.